Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ariane Bleiweiss, Marketing Manager at KELA. Today, our marvelous Director of Threat Research, Victoria Kivilevich, will share KELA's 2024 cybercrime predictions. From hacktivist group to ransomware and extortion actors, the evolving landscape of info stealers will explore it all, including AI. So stay tuned. Victoria, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Ariane. Welcome, everyone, and let's start. So first, let me share the agenda. Today, we're going to talk about the most expected trends in cybercrime for this year, and we will discuss hacktivists and their evolution, ransomware and extortion actors and their possible focus on supply chain attacks, info stealers and infrastructure rundown that could turn into the main provider of initial access to different actors, AI threats, specifically the companies implementing it, and takedowns and how they can affect the threat landscape. Before we go into that, let me quickly explain what we at KELA treat as a cybercrime ecosystem and how do we work with it. So the cybercrime ecosystem is composed of sellers and buyers, just as your usual financial ecosystem. You can find there anything from databases with personal information to malware and cybercrime tools. And this ecosystem is essentially online sources from closed access dedicated marketplaces to specific instant messaging groups and sometimes even clear web websites and social media. So where do we come in? We collect information from these sources 24 hours, 7 days a week, and we leverage our expertise to identify threats, to alert clients, and provide any additional intelligence that we can. The existence of all this ecosystem means that a single threat actor or a group don't have to conduct an attack against an organization from start to end. They can just purchase relevant tools, credentials, and initial access online. KELA collects all these offers and turns them into structured data to allow monitoring of an organization exposure in cybercrime sources. As you understand, it is crucial to make sure that any compromise discussed in the sources is mitigated before it becomes a more serious cyber attack. And it is also a large database that can help cybercrime investigators to trace a threat or identify an identity of a threat actor. Our insights serve different use cases, such as cyber threat intelligence, vulnerability, attack surface intelligence, and you can explore them on our website, and we will come back to the topic of today's webinar. So coming back to the threats we expect to see this year, because unfortunately, winter holidays are over, both for us and cyber criminals. We actually know they had some holidays. You can see some of their New Year wishes here. They wish to each other 0 days, a lot of 0 days, or fat logs, and similar things. And we also know they celebrated New Year because we observed no ransomware victims posted on New Year's Eve. So as you see on the graph, the show is already going on. They came back. So let's discuss which types of threats and changes we're expecting this year. So as we are entering this year with 2 wars that have been marked with significant involvement of hacktivists, we know that these types of actors aren't going to rust. Just to remind you what are hacktivists, they are groups or individuals who conduct attacks in support of their political, social, or religious beliefs, and they use computer technology. They can target multinational organizations and governments, and what they are doing, they're looking to bring attention to causes they believe are important. With the quick adoption of Telegram as a main way to self-organize, to attract attention, to announce attacks, activists have learned to create noise around their activities. These are some news titles related to hacktivists involved into Russia-Ukraine and Israel-Hamas war on a cyber side. So what do these actors do on Telegram? There are several types of activities. First, they announce DDoS, defacement, doxing attacks. They also form a community of volunteers that transforms into hacktivist teams. They gather and share potential targets from and with their community, and they also encourage them to follow their lead. They provide tools for their followers to assist them in the attacks, and of course, they gather funds for their hacktivist efforts. So what is happening now? Overall, the groups should be now entering a more established state. With the Russia-Ukraine war, the main players seem to have been set. You may have heard such names as No Name, Anonymous Sudan, and others. So they are the main players. And with the Israel-Hamas war, the landscape can still change, but they're also in a more evolved state because most of these groups that are participating in this conflict aren't new, and they just joined the war on the cyber side. So here is a glimpse into the daily activities on KELA platform. It is a feature query that we have for the most important hacktivists. Here you can see some pro-Russian ones, and here are pro-Hamas and pro-Palestinian actors. And I took this screenshot a few days before the webinar, but if I open the same feature query now, there will be dozens of posts from the last several hours. So the pace is quite big. So a possible evolution of such groups in this year can be related to several factors. First, forming alliances, and second, seeking for additional funding methods. For example, here you can see anti-Israel activist groups uniting into a collective, and a lot of the attacks they conduct are performed by several groups, which consolidate their resources to target specific victims. Next example, you can see that alliances can be formed even among hacktivists and financially motivated groups. For example, a recent iteration of Lapsus Group, which has always been a financially motivated actor, is now joining other hacktivists in campaigns devoted to Free Palestine. So we expect more such alliances to appear and hacktivists to become even more interconnected with financially motivated cybercriminals. And speaking about finances, this is the next trend we've seen this year, and we expect it to continue. Hacktivists are trying to fund themselves through financially motivated cyber activities. These activities can include donations, but also alternative methods, some of which you see on the screen, which include hack for hire, extortion. Some of them are even video streaming their attacks and are collecting donations during the streaming. So we expect hacktivists to continue to look for new methods to generate income and to go on with the activities. As for the type of the attacks, before we go to our assumptions, I just want to show a poll we conducted on our socials to see what people think. Surprisingly, not everyone expected the same as we did. So you can see that people chose phishing attacks, which are in fact less used by hacktivists. And to our forecast, we expect DDoS defacement with occasional data theft attacks to persist as the main tactics of hacktivists in this year. Potentially, following the state-sponsored attack on Kyivstar, a Ukrainian telecommunications provider, which was claimed through a hacktivist group, we think that more nation-state actors will use hacktivists as a cover-up, which can result in more destructive and sophisticated attacks. So, for example, here you can see an announcement of this hacktivist group, Sentitok, which may be one of the first such attacks. And of course, as discussed, hacktivists will continue to form alliances and to look for new funding methods. Now, let's discuss ransomware and extortion actors. So just stealing data in addition to encryption or performing DDoS is a known trick. As a next big tactic, some prominent actors have already tried attacking third parties, which resulted in massive data breaches. This is, of course, what we saw last year. I think everyone heard about that, the case of the movie transfer protocol vulnerability, which was exploited by KLOP ransomware gang, which is now more extortion gang, because they don't really use ransomware anymore in the attacks. And in June last year, KLOP named its first victims that have been affected. And since then, hundreds of companies from different countries have acknowledged being affected by the incident. You can see here KLOP's victims over the last year with a big uptick in June and July related to the MOVEit vulnerability. It's of course not the only case. There were more similar cases. The one I want to highlight is related to a New Zealand company called Mercury IT, which is an IT provider. And in November 2022, they announced they suffered a cyber attack, and a month later, Logbit claimed responsibility for this attack. What is interesting that you can see here the post from Logbit blog, in which they claim that they have compromised the company's clients as well, and they leaked their data, which was obtained through this company. So we see that different factors seem to have realized the potential of such a compromise. This is logical. They aim not only to compromise assets of a single company, they want to increase the number of potential victims and to target a wide range of third parties. So it has resulted in an increased supply of initial access to third parties through the cybercrime ecosystem. And we see that initial access brokers, which are working with ransomware actors, are now emphasizing that. You can see on the screenshot the GhostSec hacking group, which is trying to sell access on one of the forums, access to an Indian IT company. And they explicitly say this is a great investment opportunity for deploying ransomware or supply chain attacks. So they know it. Another example, an actor is selling access to a European IT company, which includes access to clients' information. And you can see here also he specifies for potential buyers that one access provides an opportunity to attack more than 1,000 clients. And this is exactly what, for example, a ransomware actor can do if they buy this access. So our bet is that data transfer solutions and managed service providers will be an attractive target for ransomware and extortion actors in this year. Of course, it requires organizations to closely examine their supply chain and minimize the attack surface. Next, let's move to infestealers. To remind you, information stealing malware is designed to steal credentials and digital fingerprints from the machines of infected users. And information stealer logs, the information that was stolen, is sold in the cybercrime ecosystem, essentially providing threat actors with compromised credentials. A market of compromised credentials acquired through such malware will only thrive this year. We are sure of that. Because smarter attackers have understood that a single employee credential they can obtain for $10 can result in a high-profile compromise. For example, Uber case. Uber discovered that its network was breached, and the attackers were able to access multiple services and internal tools used at Uber. And the threat actor, who claimed to be behind the attack, shared more information in an interview. So they said they first obtained a valid username and password for an external contractor of Uber, and then they social engineered this contractor to provide an MFA one-time code to logged in. So the compromised credentials, this valid username and password that was used initially in the attack, could be credentials that were put up for sale earlier on the Russian market and known automated marketplace. And apparently purchased by the threat actor, these logs contained authorization information for an identity and access management provider of Uber. You can see it on the screen. These logs indicate that at least 2 Uber employees from Indonesia and Brazil have been infected by the information stealing Trojans, Raccoon, and Redline. So based on demand for information stealer logs, the cybercrime ecosystem adapts and provides innovative ways of obtaining such credentials, which includes clouds of logs. For those of you who haven't heard about this, clouds of logs operate on a subscription basis, and they allow threat actors to purchase multiple bots together through platforms like Telegram, and not only buy credentials one by one on traditional markets such as Russian market that we saw in the previous slide. So we expect more and more actors to use these clouds of logs and create new ones. And here you can see typical cloud of logs Telegram channel. If you pay $40 a week, you can access thousands of logs, with some of them probably containing credentials for corporate resources. We think that infrastructure around infestealers will be growing. So, for example, there are dedicated services aimed to filter valid and relevant credentials from the overall amount. Here you can see one of them, focused on corporate access, so-called checker for logs. And here is another example of an actor who is interested in buying logs that contain credentials to different remote tools, usually used in corporate entities. You can see here Global Protect, Cisco, Citrix, and other solutions. So we know it's quite in demand. And we, of course, expect that the market will thrive and provide new innovative solutions for actors who wish to purchase logs for their purposes. The success of battling this threat will depend on early access to this data, which can enable to discover compromised credentials before sophisticated threat actors acquire them. Now, let's move on to AI. So, while cybersecurity companies have been adopting AI for defense, threat actors have been also poking around for different ways to leverage AI in their attacks. We've seen them trying to automate their identification of vulnerabilities to optimize phishing attacks, malware development, and so on. I just prepared a few examples for you from discussions in cybercrime forums. Here's just a general discussion from an actor who wonders for what AI can be leveraged. Here's an actor who shares an alleged ransomware code they wrote using AI. And here is an actor who added a bot based on ChatGPT to their website, so this bot could answer questions from users. But overall, the process has been mostly inconsistent, and we think it will most likely stay the same this year. So we don't expect major breakthroughs in terms of AI suddenly doing all the work instead of hackers. What we do expect is that threat actors will definitely focus on attacking organizations that have adopted AI but haven't yet managed to properly secure it. We know there is a lack of legislation and also absence on best practices established over years, so the cost of implementing AI without effective protection measures can be too high. We know that ChatGPT itself was breached and some companies were forbidden to use it, and we also saw some actors paying attention to AI weaknesses. So there are some main methods we saw the actors discussing, mostly related to building prompts that will abuse AI. Here is a few of them. For example, asking a question in a hypothetical story or simulator, instructing the model to ignore all the previous instructions, which is called do anything now approach, using role-playing prompts, instructing the model to provide answers, either they are from movies or theater scenes, and also splitting malicious text into chunks so it doesn't trigger defense mechanisms of the model, which is called token smuggling. So of course I cannot provide you with specific prompts I discussed because it's too sensitive, but these are the main methods they're trying to use. And the discussions are quite vivid. Here you can see some of them with just titles. So this is something to consider before you implement AI. You need to know how to test it for abuse. You need to know how to protect it, and you need to know what cyber criminals are talking about it. Because if you have AI implementation, there is a chance it will be targeted this year. Finally, let's discuss takedowns. So takedowns orchestrated by law enforcement agencies have been instrumental in disrupting cybercriminal activities. However, when we look ahead to this year, we need to acknowledge that the threat actors are very resilient. So maybe you've heard that in late August last year, FBI announced they dismantled the Quackbot malware infrastructure, but then only 3 months after, new phishing campaigns of Quackbot were identified. And what is interesting, there is Blackbuster ransomware gang that was known to use Quackbot for initial access, and it also survived the takedown. For example, you can see on the graph that in September, following the disruption, the activity almost stopped, but then it returned to previous levels. Another example is the Alpha ransomware gang, ALPV, stepping over the seizure of its blog. So in December, FBI successfully seized one of the websites, and an alternative ALPV site remained accessible. As of now, this alternate website remains functional. You can see here that it regularly features new victims added by the group. What is interesting that in reaction to the FBI's interference, the group has modified its rules. It actually permitted affiliates of the group to target any sector, including healthcare, and it increased the ransom share that the affiliate get. You can see here one of the posts about the victims that was created after this takedown, and in this post, ALPV emphasized that no victim will receive any discount or additional time to reach out. So historically, after law enforcement actions, threat actors tend to regroup, to rebrand, to resurface under new aliases, and we expect that threat actors will continue to evolve their tactics. And As this battlefield evolves, it's crucial to continue a diverse approach that will not only disrupt the operation of the most sophisticated actors, but will also complicate their use of the cybercrime ecosystem and their supply chain, such as infostillers that we discussed, initial access brokers, and so on. So a few recommendations on how to protect. To stay ahead of cybercriminals, enterprise defenders need to be proactive in their defense. They need to create a reality-based security strategy, which of course should include strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, up-to-date software, firewalls, training employees on how to protect themselves online. This is very important. And sometimes a compromise still happens, and then you need to have a strategy in place. Communication plan for employees and customers, and a response plan for the aftermath of the attack. We believe that monitoring cybercrime sources and proactive approach is needed to stay ahead of the latest threats and to understand the different types of criminal activities and the exposure of a specific company's attack surface. So to help you with that, we offer a 2 weeks free of charge trial of KELA's platform to use our system for investigation of the cybercrime underground. And once you register, we will reach out to you to help you to set up a monitor to track your organization assets. So that was it for today. I am ready to answer your questions. I will leave the QR code for you to scan, and I will check what questions do we have. So one question that we have is, what's the point of tracking ransomware blocks if my vendor can pay ransom? I assume you mean that the vendor that you have paid ransom, never appeared on the company's block, and therefore you have no way to know if it was compromised. Partially it's true, but actually there are other ways to know that the company was compromised. So unfortunately, or fortunately, a lot of negotiations are exposed. So we as researchers and I assume that threat actors can access some negotiations because threat actors do it through dedicated portals, which can be accessed by anyone who has a login password or other code needed to log into specific negotiations. And unfortunately, we've seen these negotiations staying live even after the company paid the ransom, even with the list of stolen files and so on. So this is, of course, not related to tracking only ransomware blocks. This is related to tracking all the cybercrime ecosystem in general. And even if the company paid the ransom, never appeared on the blog, you can still see the initial signs of compromise. What I mentioned about infostillers is very, very relevant here because this is the first point where you can see the company being compromised and already know that there is a chance that your vendor will be compromised. So of course, there is no point in tracking only ransomware blocks. There is a point in tracking all the relevant sources. There is an interesting question also related to ransomware. Any insights as of why post-exploitation payloads changed from extortion to supply chain attacks, meaning possibly war-related or more compromised, deemed more valuable? Yes, we think that it is related to compromise more and more companies. And this is actually, I think, this is what some actors have explicitly said in the interviews and in their chatter in cybercrime sources. And this is something that they threat to the companies that they attack, that we will extort all your clients, we will extort any data. We actually saw that not only with corporate victims. For example, there was a case where a healthcare organization was attacked, and ransomware actors contacted all the patients separately offering them to pay a ransom, of course, smaller amount than one that the company would pay. But still, we see that they're trying to maximize their profits in every possible way. We don't think it is related to war. It is related to them being creative in trying to get more money. And this is what they have always been done. This is how double extortion started, triple extortion, and now supply chain attacks. And of course, there's successful, so-called successful cases of other companies making noise. Also, we think inspire other cyber criminals to follow this path and target more third-party providers. Can we try the platform? What is the procedure? Yes, of course, you can just scan this QR code that you have, and then you will receive a free 2 weeks trial. And please reach out to us if you have any questions on how to use it. But it's also pretty intuitive, and we have, of course, a guide on the main page. So I'm sure you will manage. Is the system covering the deep and dark web? Of course, it is. I just want to remind you that the deep and the dark web is not the only place where cyber criminals are active. There is a lot of clear web websites and especially instant messaging platforms that have a lot of cyber criminals. I'm sure you know about Telegram. We think that on one side being a messenger, on another side, it turned into being a full cybercrime hub. Many actors from different origins, Russian-speaking actors, Chinese-speaking actors, are using Telegram on a daily basis. And in addition to deep and dark web, this is, of course, a source that requires to be monitored. Let me check if we have any additional questions. There was a question: are pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine activists as worthy attention as pro-Russian ones? I understand where the question could come from, because we've seen more big news titles about pro-Russian activists because they have been targeting Europe and US and basically all the world that is against Russia and supports Ukraine. But actually, we see the same pattern with pro-Palestinian actors. It may have been slow in the beginning because they were mostly focused on Israel. But we've seen them attacking supporters of Israel. And this is actually the reason that some groups joined the conflict. As I remember, Cyber Bangladesh team has been targeting India before the war. And then when the war started, they continued now adding, and this is also for the fact that India supports Israel. So our time is running out. I think we can finish on that. Thank you all for the questions and for feedback. And we see you on the platform, I hope. Thank you.